G'day, welcome back to Plugged In Australia, episode 51 for Friday, the 8th of May 2026. And today we've got a very China-heavy episode, but in a way that really matters for Australian buyers. JAC is looking beyond diesel utes with an affordable EV hatch under valuation and even a premium electric brand being looked at for Australia. Xpeng owners have finally received some reassurance from TrueEV as the legal fight with Xpeng continues. Omoda has a new small SUV coming in 2027 with petrol, hybrid, plug-in hybrid and electric possibilities. And Geely's taking a slower, more staged approach to the Australian market. Lexus has now revealed the TZ, its first three-row electric SUV, with Australia now officially under consideration. Without further ado, let's get into it. JAC has only really been known in Australia so far for the T9 Ute and soon the Hunter plug-in hybrid Ute. However, the brand is now looking very seriously at a completely different part of the market. Its first passenger EV for Australia could be the JAC E30X, a small electric hatchback that is being brought here as a single evaluation vehicle. According to JAC Motors Australia Managing Director Ahmed Mahmood, the E30X is coming here in about a month or so the local team can get some feedback, test the business case, and work out whether it makes sense for Australian showrooms. Now, that doesn't mean it's confirmed yet. This is still an evaluation vehicle, not a locked-in launch. But the important part is that JAC is clearly looking beyond dual cab utes, and if the E30X gets the green light, it could arrive here as early as 2027, potentially after a facelift. The reason this matters is price. In China, the JAC E30X has been repositioned very aggressively. Pricing there has dropped from 97,900 yuan to 69,900 yuan, which converts very roughly to about 14,000 Australian dollars before all the costs that come with Australian compliance, things like shipping, taxes, margins for the dealers, local specification, warranty and distribution. So no, don't expect a $14,000 EV in Australia. That's unfortunately not how this works. But it does show where JAC wants the car to sit. In China, it is priced almost exactly against the BYD Atto 1, and that is the key local comparison. The BYD Atto 1 is currently Australia's cheapest new electric vehicle, starting from $23,990 before on-road costs. If JAC can land the E30X anywhere near that territory, it could become a serious budget EV player. Size-wise, the E30X sits in the small city car end of the EV market, but it is not tiny. It measures 4,025mm long, 1,770mm wide, and 1,560mm tall, with a 2,630mm wheelbase. That places it in between the BYD Atto 1 and the Geely EX2 in overall size, and it gives it a useful footprint for Australian city and suburban driving. The Chinese market E30X is front-wheel drive with a 100 kilowatt, 175 Newton meter electric motor. Battery options include a 41 kilowatt hour lithium iron phosphate pack in lower grades and a 51.5 kilowatt hour pack in the higher models. The claimed Chinese CLTC driving range is between 405 and 505 kilometers, depending on the battery. Now, as always, we know the CLTC figures are very generous. They are not directly comparable with our WLTP figures, and they can look very optimistic compared to what drivers will see in real-world use. But even with a realistic adjustment, a battery in the low 40 to 50 kilowatt hour range could still make the E30X a very practical urban commuter EV. For some context, the entry BYD Atto 1 uses a 30 kilowatt hour battery and has 220 kilometers of WLTP range, while the higher spec Atto 1 gets 43.2 kilowatt hour battery and about 310 kilometers WLTP. So if JAC brings the bigger battery E30X here, it could potentially land with a stronger range than the most affordable BYD. Equipment in China includes LED headlights, a fixed sunroof, wireless phone charging, and a 12.8-inch central touchscreen. Higher grades get a larger 15.6-inch screen. Again, that does not guarantee Australian specification, but it just gives us an idea of what the car can offer if JAC wants to position it as a value-heavy EV. The big question is whether Australians will trust JAC in the passenger car space. That's the challenge. The ute gives JAC a bit of a foothold, but it does not automatically give it credibility against the likes of BYD, MG, GWM, Chery, Geely, GAC, and the growing list of Chinese brands already fighting for attention. Affordable EV buyers are very price sensitive, but they're not stupid. They still care about safety rating, warranty, service backup, parts, availability, and resale value. That is especially important because the affordable EV segment is about to get very crowded. We've got the BYD Atto 1 is here, the MG4 Urban is pushing lower end of the EV market, Geely has the EX2 coming, JAC has the Aeon UT, Chery and Omoda JAC are also preparing more electrified product. So JAC cannot just turn up with a cheap price and expect instant success. However, if it gets the E30X right, if the price is sharp, the range is realistic, the safety rating is strong, and the ownership package is credible, this could be one of the more interesting affordable EVs to come to Australia. And just as importantly, it would mark the start of JAC's move from being a ute brand in Australia to being a broader electric vehicle brand. At the other end of the scale, JAC is not only looking at cheap EVs, it is also considering whether to bring a premium electric sub-brand to Australia, potentially under the Define nameplate. That's a very different story from the E30X. The E30X is about affordability, city driving, and getting a foot into the growing cheap EV market. Define is about whether JAC can move upmarket and compete with brands like Denza, Zeekr, IM, and Way. That is a big step. JAC Motors Australia has confirmed it is looking at opportunities around the Define line, but there are no launch dates, no dealer plans, and no confirmed models as yet. So this is not a, as I like to say, locked in Australia launch. It is more of a sign of where JAC sees the market going. The Define concept was first shown in 2024 before evolving into the Define S sedan and Define X SUV at the 2025 Shanghai Motor Show. The big technology headline is a 1000 volt electric architecture. It's a serious number because 800 volt systems are already considered advanced in the current market, and a 1000 volt architecture points to faster charging capability, lower electrical losses, and stronger performance potential if the rest of the system can support it. The Define S has been reported with a tri-motor drivetrain producing 590 kilowatts with a claimed 0 to 100 kilometers per hour of 2.3 seconds. That is not normally family car territory, that is high performance luxury EV territory. And this is where the Australian context gets a little bit interesting. We're about to see a wave of premium Chinese electric brands trying to establish themselves here. Denza is already part of BYD's push into more expensive vehicles. Zeekr is tied to the Geely Group. IM is connected to SAIC and MG. Way sits under GWM. And all of them are trying to prove that Chinese brands can move beyond value and into genuine premium territory. JAC wants to know whether it can play the game too. The hard truth is that this is much harder than launching a cheaper EV. With an affordable hatch, buyers may forgive a less familiar badge if the price, the range, and warranty makes sense. With a premium EV, however, buyers are spending serious money, and they expect the whole experience to match. Got to have the showroom quality, service quality, software support, parts supply, brand prestige, resale confidence, and long-term trust. A 590 kilowatt sedan is impressive on paper. However, in Australia, that is only one part of the equation. The car also has to survive comparisons with Tesla, Polestar, Genesis, BMW, Mercedes-Benz, Audi, Lexus, Volvo, Porsche, and the incoming Chinese luxury brands as well. It also needs a dealer and a service network capable of supporting high-end customers. There is also the question of brand identity. JAC is not a household name here. It has to explain who it is, why it matters, and why someone should spend premium money on one of its cars. Now, that does not mean it can't work. We have seen very fast brand perception shifts in Australia over the last few years. BYD, for example, went from unknown to mainstream pretty quickly. MG moved from budget curiosity to major sales player. GWM and Chery are also building real momentum. However, premium takes longer. You can buy volume with price. You cannot buy trust quite as easily. So for now, treat the Define story as a signpost. JAC is clearly not planning to stay in the ute lane forever. It is looking at small EVs, commercial EVs, plug-in hybrid utes, off-road SUVs, and now potentially premium EVs. That is a massive ambition for a brand still finding its feet in Australia. If JAC can execute properly, it could become much more than a T9 ute company, but if it spreads itself too thin, it risks confusing buyers before it has built the foundation. Next up, Xpeng owners in Australia have finally received a public reassurance from TrueEV. This is the local distributor caught in a legal dispute with the Chinese electric car maker. As we reported earlier, this situation has been very messy. TrueEV was appointed as the exclusive importer, distributor and retailer for Xpeng in Australia in 2024. It launched the G6 electric SUV locally and began building a network of showrooms and service locations. Then the relationship between TrueEV and Xpeng deteriorated and federal court action followed. The fresh update is that TrueEV has sent a letter to Xpeng customers, signed by Chief Executive Jason Clark, apologising for the lack of communication and saying the company remains committed to owners and buyers. According to TrueEV, warranties continue to be supported, cashback offers are still being processed, although there is a backlog. Customer support and after-sales are being treated as priorities, and the company says it is focused on maintaining continuity of service whilst the legal matters are dealt with. That is useful reassurance for owners, but it does not mean the issue is fully resolved. The legal dispute is still active. TrueEV launched federal court proceedings in March 2026 against multiple Xpeng-related entities. The case has involved Xpeng's Australian operations, vehicle supply, parts supply, timelines, and broader control of the brand locally. It has been reported that TrueEV was ordered by the court on 30th of April to pay just over $1.25 million as security for costs, with the next court date listed for 6th of October 2026. It has also been reported that a receiver had been appointed earlier to sell off 197 vehicles. Now, just for those that don't know what that means, it doesn't mean that they've lost. It means that the judge has ordered that they put up this money as assurance just in case they lose. Because obviously, if you lose, you generally will pay the winner's costs. So he wants to make sure that the funds are there for the case. Some people speculate that means he thinks that there's not a strong case to be held, but that's not necessarily the case, and this does happen in these sorts of larger cases. At the same time, Xpeng Motors Australia has set up its own local operation, with Hidesuke Takesui appointed as Chief Operating Officer from April 2026. And Hidesuke, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. I did look up the Japanese pronunciations, so I gave it a go. Xpeng has talked about a direct factory-backed model, which would put more control in the hands of the manufacturer rather than the original distributor. For owners, the big concern is obvious. Who looks after the car? The Xpeng G6 is a serious EV. It entered Australia as a direct rival to the Tesla Model Y, and it had the kind of pricing, charging speed and equipment level that made people pay attention. Xpeng had also been preparing future models like the G9 and the X9 People Mover for Australia. However, none of that matters if owners feel uncertain about warranty, parts and service. The good news is that Australian consumer law does not disappear because two companies are arguing. The distributor problem does not magically remove consumer guarantees. The ACCC makes clear that consumer guarantees apply to vehicles bought from licensed dealers and that warranties cannot replace or take away those rights. Dealers also cannot simply tell consumers to go away and deal only with the manufacturer. So from a consumer standpoint, owners should keep everything documented: purchase contracts, service records, warranty documents, email correspondence, cashback claims, fault reports, and any written promise from the distributor or the dealer. If something goes wrong, the paper trail is really going to matter. In reality though, reassurance letters help, but certainty comes from stable operations. Owners need functioning service centres, parts availability, warranty approvals, software support, and clear communication. Buyers with the deposits need to know where their vehicles will be delivered, who holds their money, and what happens if the brand structure changes. If Xpeng ends up moving to a more direct factory-backed Australian operation, that would ultimately be a positive for long-term support. Factory-backed distribution can work well when it is properly resourced. However, during the transition, the uncertainty is real. So the message for current owners is, do not panic, but do stay organised. TrueEV says warranties, cashbacks and support are continuing. Xpeng appears to be building a more direct Australian presence, and Australian consumer law still provides protection. But until the legal dispute is resolved and the operating structure is clear, this remains one of the bigger cautionary stories in the local EV market. It is also a reminder that the EV transition is not only about batteries, range and charging speed, it is about the boring stuff too: distributors, contracts, parts warehouses, service networks, court cases, and consumer law. And for a car owner, the boring stuff can matter more than a 10 to 80 charging claim. Omoda JAC is preparing another small SUV for Australia, and this one is called the Omoda 4. It is due here in the first quarter of 2027, so we're looking at the January to March window if the current timing holds. It will sit below the Omoda 7 and Omoda 9, and it is being pitched as a smaller, more style-led SUV aimed at younger buyers. Now, this one's not an EV-only model, but it still matters for us here because the platform is expected to support multiple electrified powertrains, including hybrid, plug-in hybrid, and full electric versions. The Omoda 4 is expected to be around 4.4 metres long, with a wheelbase of around 2.6 metres. That puts it into the small SUV zone, where it will line up against cars like the Toyota Corolla Cross, Hyundai Kona, Kia Seltos, MG ZS, BYD Atto 2, and depending on powertrain, electric hatches and crossovers like the MG4 and the BYD Dolphin. The design is very much from the modern Chinese SUV playbook: aggressive front-end styling, sharp creases, distinctive LED lighting, a coupe-like roofline, and full-width rear light bar. Omoda calls the design language Cyber Mecca, and whether you like that name or not, the intent is clear. This is meant to look bolder than the average small SUV. Inside, early details point to a 13.2-inch central touchscreen, a digital instrument cluster, 50-watt wireless phone charger, and a fighter jet style start-stop switch with a flip cover. The last detail will not matter to everyone, but it shows the target buyer. This is not being pitched as a conservative family appliance. Omoda is trying to make it feel more dynamic, more dramatic, and tech-heavy. Underneath, the Omoda 4 is expected to use Chery's T1X architecture. Globally, the model is expected with turbo petrol, hybrid, plug-in hybrid, and full electric powertrains. Early plug-in hybrid information points to a 1.5-litre turbo petrol engine with around 110 kilowatts, paired with a plug-in hybrid system. Omoda JAC's broader super hybrid system already appears in vehicles like the JAC J7 and Omoda 9, with around 165 kilowatts in some applications. Sub 8 second 0 to 100 kilometers per hour performance, and total driving range claims of up to 1,000 kilometers WLTP. For Australia, that could be very relevant. A small plug-in hybrid SUV with meaningful electric range could work well for buyers who do short daily commutes but still want petrol backup for longer regional drives. It could also suit renters, apartment dwellers, or households that cannot rely on public fast charging all the time. The fully electric Omoda 4 is expected to use a single motor setup and offer up to about 430 kilometers of driving range. Although again, we need to wait for final Australian specification and testing before we get too excited. Production reportedly began in April of 2026, with Europe expected to receive the model first, and right-hand drive markets including Australia and New Zealand following later. Now, pricing is the big unknown. Overseas estimates have pointed to a price around 20,000 euros, which converts to about 32 grand Australian dollars. That does not mean it will be $32,000 here, but it gives a rough indication of where Omoda wants it to sit. Locally, the related JAC J5 gives some useful context, with petrol versions starting from $25,990 drive away, and the electric Summit version priced from $36,990 drive away. So an Omoda 4 EV or plug-in hybrid somewhere around the mid to high 30s or low 40,000s would not be surprising, depending on battery size, equipment, and powertrain. Fact of the matter is that Omoda JAC will need to be very careful with pricing. The Australian small SUV market is brutal. Buyers got a lot of choice, and Chinese brands are now competing not only against Toyota, Hyundai, and Kia, but against each other. That means value will matter, but so will clarity. Right now, Omoda JAC has a growing range, but it also risks becoming confusing. Omoda 4, Omoda 5, Omoda 7, Omoda 9. You got the JAC J5, the JAC J7. That is a lot of nameplates for a relatively new brand. The challenge will be making the lineup simple enough for regular buyers to understand. However, if Omoda 4 arrives with sharp pricing, a strong warranty, proper safety rating, and a useful plug-in hybrid or EV option, it could become one of the more important models in the brand's Australian push, because this is exactly the part of the market where Australia needs more choice. Affordable, efficient, practical small SUVs with real electric capability. Geely is taking a more measured approach to Australia than some of the other Chinese brands, and honestly, that may not be a bad thing. We've seen a lot of brands try to sprint into the Australian market with a huge model list, big promises, and very little brand recognition. Now, sometimes that works, and sometimes it just creates confusion. Geely seems to be taking a bit of a slower path. Launch, build awareness, add models gradually, and use electrified vehicles to grow into the mainstream rather than flooding showrooms overnight. The brand arrived in Australia with the EX5 electric SUV, followed by the starry EMI plug-in hybrid SUV. The next big model for this audience is the EX2, a small electric hatchback due in the third quarter of 2026. As we have covered earlier, the EX2 is a very important car because it has serious volume potential. In China, it was the country's best-selling car in 2025, with more than 465,000 sales. That's not just best-selling EV, that's best-selling car. The Australian version is not fully specified yet, but the EX2 is expected to sit around the $30,000 mark, putting it right in the fight with the BYD Dolphin, MG4 Urban, JAC Aeon UT, BYD Atto 1 and other affordable EVs. In South African specification, the EX2 uses a 39.4 kilowatt-hour lithium iron phosphate battery, an 85 kilowatt and 150 newton meter rear-mounted motor, and offers 325 kilometers of WLTP range. DC fast charging peaks at 70 kilowatts. It is not a performance car. The 0 to 100 kilometer per hour time in that spec is 11.5 seconds, but that's obviously not the point. The EX2 is about affordable electric transport, decent space, low running costs, and a city-friendly package. It measures 4,135 millimeters long, 1,805 mm wide, and 1,580 mm tall, with a 2,650 mm wheelbase. Boot space is 375 litres, expanding to 1,320 litres with the rear seats down, and it also gets a 70 litre frunk. That is genuinely useful package for a small EV. The cabin also looks stronger than the price point might suggest, with a 14.6-inch touchscreen, an 8.8-inch digital instrument cluster, rear air vents, smartphone mirroring, available wireless phone charging, and a generally clean interior layout. The important detail is that Geely does not seem to be treating Australia as a dumping ground for random models. It is building a proper product ladder. By the end of 2026, the local lineup should include the EX5, the starry EMI, and the EX2. Then by the end of 2027, Geely says it wants to more than double its model range. The future rollout is expected to include a larger 5-seat plug-in hybrid SUV in the first half of 27, a possible 7-seat SUV, yes please, and then more boxy SUV models in the second half of 2027. A plug-in hybrid sedan, the M Grand EM1, is also being lined up as a possible rival to the Toyota Camry. The sedan point's interesting because most brands have basically surrendered the non-SUV market to Toyota. Tesla's got a small handful of others as well. If Geely can bring a sharp value plug-in hybrid sedan with strong efficiency, it could also give rideshare drivers, fleets and families another option beyond the usual suspects. Geely's broader global structure also matters. This is not a tiny standalone company trying its luck. Geely Holding Group has connections across Volvo, Polestar, Lotus, Smart, Zeekr, Lynx & Co, Proton, Radar, Geely Galaxy and more. That does not automatically mean every Geely branded car will be brilliant, but it does mean the group has serious engineering depth, battery knowledge, platform sharing and global experience. Sales-wise, Geely has made a decent start. In 2025, it sold 5,010 vehicles in Australia, with 3,944 of those being EX5s and 1,066 being Starries. In the first quarter of 2026, it sold 2,821 vehicles, split almost evenly between the EX5 and the Starry. That's not Toyota-level volume, obviously, but for a new brand, it's a real start. You need to keep in mind that Geely still has to prove long-term ownership. The products are promising, the group credentials are strong, but Australian buyers will judge it on service access, parts supply, software support, resale values, battery warranty, dealer experience, and how the cars hold up after 5 or 6 years. That is why the slow road may actually be the right road. A measured rollout gives Geely time to build the network, train technicians, understand Australian buyer expectations, and avoid dumping too many unfamiliar nameplates into the market at once. If the EX2 lands at the right price, it could be a volume car. If the Starry EMI proves reliable and efficient, it could help Geely in the plug-in hybrid space. And if the 2027 product rollout is handled carefully, Geely could become one of the more serious Chinese brands in Australia. Not the loudest, not the flashiest, but possibly one of the more sustainable. Now to one of the biggest stories of the episode, the Lexus TZ has been revealed. As we reported earlier, Lexus had teased a large 3-row electric SUV that was expected to wear the TZ badge. Now we have the reveal. And the important Australian angle is that Lexus Australia is officially assessing it for local production. This is Lexus's first 3-row electric SUV, and it is a proper large family vehicle, not a small EV stretched into something it is not. It is closely related to Toyota's new electric Highlander and Subaru's related Getaway, but Lexus is giving it the premium treatment. In North America, the TZ is due to launch before the end of 2026. Australian timing is not confirmed, but there are a few reasons this looks possible. It is expected to be built in Japan, which helps the right-hand drive business case, and Lexus Australia has already said it is reviewing the model. The size is substantial. The TZ measures about 5,100mm long, 1,990mm wide, and 1,705mm tall, sitting on a 3,050mm wheelbase. That makes it longer than a Kia EV9 and right in the large luxury family SUV space. Battery options include a 76.96 kWh pack and a 95.82 kWh pack, depending on market and specification. Reports are that the larger 95.82 kWh battery will offer up to 530 kilometers of WLTP range, while other reports points to around 300 miles or 482 kilometers in North American terms. Either way, this is not some short-range city SUV. It is designed to be a proper family distance EV. Fast charging is reported at up to 150 kilowatts. That's 10 to 80% in around 35 minutes. I mean, that's okay, but very far from class leading. At this size and price point, some buyers may expect 800 volt charging and higher peak speeds, especially when Korean and Chinese competitors are pushing very hard on charging performance. Speaking of performance, it should be pretty strong. The TZ is dual motor and all-wheel drive only, with around 300 kilowatts reported. That would give it a 0 to 100 kilometer per hour time of around 5.4 seconds. Lexus's direct 4 all-wheel drive system can vary torque distribution from 60-40 to rear or fully rear biased when needed. There is also 4-wheel steering available, with rear wheels turning up to 4 degrees. That matters in a vehicle this large, especially in Australian car parks, school drop-off zones and suburban streets, where a 5.1 metre SUV can feel very big very quickly. Drive modes include normal, sport and eco, plus range mode and a rear comfort mode. Rear comfort is designed to smooth out body movement for passengers by coordinating steering, braking, and drive force to reduce pitch and lateral motion. That's very Lexus. And it's not just about going fast, it's about making the rear passengers feel like they're in something expensive. Inside, the TZ appears to be pitched very much as a luxury family EV. It is expected to offer 6 or 7 seat layouts with second row captain's chairs available. The front and second row seats are ventilated, all seats are heated, and Lexus says this is the first SUV with power adjustable ottomans. The third row is designed with sofa-like cushioning, which matters because many 3-row SUVs technically have 7 seats, but the third row is really only useful for kids. Lexus appears to be trying to make the back row more genuinely livable. Other premium features include a 21-speaker Mark Levinson sound system, a panoramic glass roof, soft closed doors, power folding second and third rows, a newer Lexus interface infotainment system, wireless smartphone mirroring, improved voice control, and EV-specific functions such as charging, management, and range mapping. There are also sustainable interior models, including forged bamboo, plant-derived ultra suede, and recycled aluminium. Now, that gives Lexus a story that matches what luxury EV buyers increasingly want: comfort, technology, lower emissions, and materials that feel more modern than old school leather and wood luxury. Now, the Australian context is important. We still do not have enough large electric family SUVs here. You've got the Kia EV9, the Volvo EX90, the Cadillac is bringing the Vistic, which will be priced from $116,000 before on roads. Hyundai has the Ioniq 9, and that's pretty much it. There are some Chinese premium SUVs on the way as well, but they're still a little ways off, and most of them are plug-ins or e-revs. Now, if Lexus brings the TZ here, it would give Australian families another proper 3-row electric option from a brand with strong local trust, an established dealer network, and a reputation for reliability. That could prove very powerful. The question is, Lexus recently cut the RZ electric SUV to $84,500 before on roads, which shows the brand understands that EV pricing has to be competitive. However, the TZ is a much larger, more expensive, more premium vehicle. It is going to sit well above the RZ. Give you a bit of context, the current top of the range LX 700 F Sport, which is the 300 series Land Cruiser version for Lexus, that car at the moment drive away is $216,000 for the F Sport in the hybrid. So I think you're going to be looking at a number with a 2 in front of it if that comes to Australia, which is just puts it well and truly out of the range of the vast majority of Australians. However, if by some miracle Lexus can keep it near the Volvo EX90, which sits at about a 150 drive away for the top of the range, or the Cadillac Vistic, it could be more competitive. If it drifts too far above them, the business case becomes much harder. The other issue is charging. A larger family SUV with a big battery needs to be road trip ready. A 35-minute 10 to 80% charge is workable, but it's not amazing. For Australian families doing Sydney to Canberra, or Melbourne to regional Victoria, Brisbane to the Sunshine Coast, or larger holiday drives, maybe driving Sydney to Brisbane, charging speed and real-world highway efficiency will matter. Still, this is exactly the kind of EV Australia needs more of. Not another tiny compliance hatch, not another concept that will never be sold here, a real large 3-row family SUV from a brand Australians already know. If Lexus Australia can secure right-hand drive supply, price it sensibly, and deliver the larger battery, the TZ could become one of the most important luxury SUVs to arrive here. And when I say we don't need any more small electric hatches, I just mean that there's a lot already coming, there's a lot already here, but there's about 4 or 5 SUVs with 7 seats that are electric in Australia, and we need more of them. And that's a wrap for episode 51 of Plugged In Australia. As you can see, the Aussie EV market's not just growing, it's widening. All of those different new models coming. Hopefully Xpeng can sort themselves out between the importer and the manufacturer. As always, I very much appreciate you tuning in to listen to the episode today. If you have any feedback whatsoever, you can leave a comment or send me an email if you would like to do so privately. info@pluggedinaustralia.com.au. Thank you to everybody who has reached out and left comments thus far. It really helps me. I know we're on episode 51, but I'm still only new to this because we've obviously do quite a few episodes a week, so any feedback is very much appreciated. So until the next time, stay plugged in and stay charged. Ci vediamo.